Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Biomedical Engineering Society's interview with industry. My name is Caitlin Ludlam, or I also go by Astrobot Caitlin. I'm an engineering student at the University of Florida. I'm also the founder and director of Astrobot STEM Nonprofit Corp, which is a nonprofit organization that uses our websites and social media to connect girls to resources and role models in science, technology, engineering, and math. So I have a guest today. Her name is Alyssa Johnson. She's a senior systems engineer at Medtronic. And Alyssa, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Alyssa, as Caitlin said, and I've been working at Medtronic for the last 5 years, 4 of which have been in the risk management group, or in the restorative therapies group of Medtronic. Before that, I attended the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota for my bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. And throughout my undergraduate career, I was heavily involved in materials research with my materials professor. And I also had the opportunity to attend a research experience for undergraduates at MIT for a summer. My senior design project while at St. Thomas was sponsored by the Mayo Clinic. And that was really my first exposure into anything medical device related, again, being that my background is mechanical engineering. So that was a really cool, experience to see, learn a little bit more about anatomy and the impact that devices can have on patients. And, stepping back even further, I attended an arts high school for my senior year of high school, which is kind of unique. I feel like a lot of people are either artistically focused or science focused, but I love both, and I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there that do. But I attended Purpose Center for Arts Education and specialized in visual arts. So I was able to take classes related to oil painting, printmaking, digital art. The list goes on and on. It was a great experience overall, and they even had a class about science and art. So it was cool to see the bridge between the two. And that's something that I am continuously passionate about, trying to make those connections between the two. In my free time, I like to do a lot of art. I like to rock climb, and I also show my Afghan hound dog. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So thank you to everyone participating, and you can go ahead and start writing your questions for Quest now. And other than that, we'll get started. So Alyssa, do you want to talk a little bit about your job at Medtronic, being a senior systems engineer, maybe what your average day looked like before or after COVID?
Yeah, so as a risk management engineer, I'm analyzing the safety of various medical devices for my job. I specifically work in our full life cycle group, which is really focused on maintaining the risk management file over the lifetime of a product. So we have certain engineers at Medtronic in the risk management space that focus on pre-market. So that's really developing products so that they can be brought to market. You're, analyzing the risk associated with those products, projecting estimated risk values, so you can ultimately get to the product approval and release. Then we also have the post-market group, which is focused on our existing portfolio of released products. And, if there's any issues that are identified in the field, if complaints are submitted against certain products, then those engineers would do an assessment to analyze the issue, see what's wrong, what is the overall risk, and then they compare the risk to our overall risk management file. And my group, the life cycle group, we're in charge of kind of feeding those post-market updates back into the living risk file. So this is really important to maintain. We're required to maintain the risk file over the product's lifetime. And it's a really dynamic place to be involved. I feel like risk management as a whole is kind of a systems level position, hence my position as senior systems engineer. But you really do get to look at the product as a whole. You know, you're dealing with the design of the product, the use of the product, different ways in which that product could pose a risk to the patient, and then doing an assessment to determine that impact. So we closely work with design engineers, human factors engineers, our medical safety group to make sure we're representing the risk of these products appropriately. So that's a little bit about what I do on a daily basis. I'll say I'm not really in the lab every day. I can do all of my work from my laptop and just being connected to the tools that Medtronic has. You know, so then comparing before COVID to now, typically I would be in the office from 8 to 4, 9 to 5, around kind of the normal typical work hours. And my commute was about a half an hour. So now that COVID has hit, we're actually working remotely in almost all groups of Medtronic. I believe only functions that need to access certain labs or other equipment are allowed to go into the office right now. So it's kind of nice that my job is something I can do from my laptop completely. Makes for the transition being a little bit easier to deal with. So, yeah.
So that is your job right now with Medtronic, but what was your first job and how did you get that job? Like, what was the process?
Yeah, so actually, I'll kind of walk through the steps I took to look for jobs and some of the interview process as well, just to maybe give a little perspective of what I went through as an undergraduate. So again, my undergraduate career was very research heavy. I was kind of torn between going for a graduate degree, getting like a PhD in materials science, or joining industry. And ultimately what prompted me to make a decision was the reality of my student loans. And I really didn't want to defer them any longer. I decided that it would be best if I get into industry, see if I can find something I like, and pay some of those back. You know, in the back of my mind was I can always return to school too, so this will be a good decision in the long run. I wasn't sure what to expect entering industry and, you know, how to go about looking for a job. I kind of wanted some type of design job to combine my interests in art and engineering. So the dream, you know, back in my senior year was I want to design a concept vehicle for an automotive company, like a really cool sports car, so I could draw it and model it in CAD. That sounds really cool. But as I was searching for jobs online through the company websites of various automotive companies, I really couldn't find a good fit. Either the positions required too much experience or a different degree than mine, a more artistic degree in some cases for actually designing those concepts. So, you know, come April, May of my senior year, I still hadn't secured a position in industry. I decided I needed to dig into my network a little bit and, you know, see what's out there. If any of my professors had connections to industry that I could leverage. So through this process, I interviewed at a couple different companies. I applied, I think, for Tesla and Apple, made it through a couple rounds of interview for Apple, and even got to do a design challenge for that interview process. Kind of cool, you're solving a problem and proposing a design solution as part of their interview process. Ultimately didn't get the job with Apple, but I learned a lot, and again, was a cool interview experience. I interviewed at a local robotics company as well. I believe I was probably too transparent with those interviewing me, saying I'm planning to go back to school in about a year. I'd like to, you know, go back for my PhD and pursue that. But looking back on that, I wasn't even sure if I was going to go back to school. I wasn't sure if I would like industry. So I probably talked about going back to school a little bit too conclusively when I was interviewing there, and ultimately didn't attain that position. Then I also reached out to my advisor, and my also was my senior design advisor and the professor that I did research under. And she actually had a connection to Medtronic. There was a contracting position available, and I directly interviewed with the hiring manager and then had an informal interview with two of the engineers on the team over lunch, received the offer as a contractor. And I think, you know, thinking back, I also got an offer from another company for a full-time position. So I had to weigh the pros and cons between taking a full-time offer as a full-time employee, which would include benefits such as paid time off, health insurance, etc., versus taking this contracting position at Medtronic, which didn't offer benefits. You know, typically contracting positions don't. And as I got to, you know, thinking about that, weighing the pros and cons of each situation, ultimately I felt very connected to Medtronic's mission and the employees that I met through the interviewing process. Like even at the informal lunch interview with two engineers, I could see myself coming into work there every day. And I thought this will be a good way for me to get my foot in the door at a large med tech industry company. So I chose Medtronic, and that was my first job out of college as a contractor. And that kind of segues into, you know, I contracted for a year and a half and then was ultimately hired full-time in the risk management group. So it's been quite the journey. I definitely recommend leveraging your network when you're looking for a position in industry, because it can be quite overwhelming. You're not really sure how to apply to some of these positions that you may see on a career website. And sometimes having that direct connection with someone in the company, whether that's through a professor or just a connection you've made, I think that's very valuable in ultimately getting those positions in industry. So that's a, you know, maybe a long-winded explanation of my experience, but it's quite the journey, I think, for everyone.
How did you get jobs with all the competition from mechanical and electrical engineering applicants?
You know, that's a great question. I think it really came down to my connection into that, or into Medtronic, because my professor, my advisor, she, I think, was involved with Medtronic on a previous senior design project. So she built a really great connection with one of the managers at Medtronic through that work. And I think it provided a good picture of the University of St. Thomas and, you know, the quality of students that come out of the program there. So that was really important, you know, that my university had that connection and rapport with this company, with Medtronic. I'm not sure that I would have gotten the job without having that connection in. And, you know, I'm sure it's possible, but when everyone tells you the network, your connections are important, really listen to that, because they truly are. They can make or break getting a job or not. But I guess from my own, just, you know, when applying for jobs too, I think having that strong academic standing is also important. So I did graduate as near top of my class. So I think, you know, putting in that work and showing that you're dedicated is also important in addition to those connections.
So it's great that you had all these connections. Do you have tips about networking and how maybe what you did to network helped you gain those connections?
Yeah, so professionally, I guess I've focused on networking through different outreach activities that I'm involved in. So, you know, volunteering activities, I always like to give back to the community in some way, but also in doing that, I've found I'm not only able to connect with, let's say, students in these different outreach activities that I'm involved on, but also with other professionals. I think this would probably be the same for a student in engineering as well, to say, you know, if you're volunteering or getting involved with different clubs at your university, it's going to expose you to, you know, different people that you might not otherwise meet. So take advantage of the situations and the opportunities and really make it a point to talk to those people in person where you can. Given the current situation with COVID, I think, you know, virtual connections, you know, networking on LinkedIn is also an important way. A lot of the industry professionals that I know are more than happy to talk with students if you connect on LinkedIn and just send a quick message. You know, sometimes people even are willing to do an informal interview to provide information about what they do in their job, just so you maybe get a better sense of what's out there and what you would be interested in.
So with your work at Medtronic, you talked about working with different teams like design and human factor engineers and using that to mitigate risks in your medical devices. How do you ensure effective communication between you and all the other teams?
Yeah, so I think, you know, emails are key. You know, clear communication through email is kind of the main way that we talk at this point in time. Setting up meetings is also very important with the appropriate functions. I, you know, always recommend if you're starting a project, identify what the different needs are, you know, from the work that you'll be doing. Like in my space, again, if I'm updating risk documentation, I need to consider, you know, what updates am I making? Who is this impacting? You know, whether it's design, human factors, maybe the labeling group. I have to actively involve them in updates and making sure that they are in the loop. So it's something you have to be a little bit proactive about, at least in my space. Risk management. So you have to take that initiative and be very intentional. So right now we also do a lot of like working meetings, you know, between employees. This would be, I guess, the same as sitting down in a conference room to get work done. It can have its challenges, of course, because if you have many people in a meeting, sometimes people talk over each other. But I think a lot of people have gotten used to that as we've continued, since this is the new normal for us.
So when you're working with all these teams, have you ever dealt with gender equality?
You know, I guess I'll talk about that in two parts. I guess one, my experience in industry, and then two, my experience in school. So in industry at Medtronic, I honestly haven't experienced too much in terms of gender inequality. I can only think of one situation where I was collaborating with certain engineers, male engineers that were, I think, very far along in their career. And I provided some input about a need that I had for the project and a proposal of how we could resolve the issue. And I felt that my input really wasn't heard by that engineer. And I can't tell, like I honestly can't contribute that to my gender specifically. I'm not sure if that's what it was, or maybe just my age, that I'm a younger engineer, and some, maybe in some situations, engineers that are more established may not take the time to listen to you, or maybe it was just the way that I was communicating the information wasn't clear, but he kind of dismissed my feedback. And then another male engineer that was part of this meeting said the same exact thing that I had said. And, you know, the person that had dismissed my comments seemed to then accept the feedback and It was a little bit frustrating, to be honest, but again, it's not something that I could directly attribute to my gender or age. I try to view things in a pretty good light, but I definitely talked about that situation with my manager at the time. It's very important, you know, if you experience that in industry, to express that to your manager so that if it happens again, steps can be taken. But overall, Medtronic has been a wonderful place to work. I really have no complaints when it comes to gender equality, and a lot of the teams that I've been on, there's been a lot of female engineering presence as well. But I guess I've also heard in other industries, like aerospace, or, you know, even outside of like aerospace or med tech, I have heard situations where female engineers, you know, feel they're not listened to, but that makes me very thankful to be a part of the medical device industry here. And then, you know, the second part to that, stepping back to my educational experience, I'd say, like, in the classroom, I never experienced anything that jumped out to me as a gender inequality, let's say. A lot of my professors were females. I felt respected by my male peers in my classes. The one thing I'll say is when it came to the lab experience, when starting out, I honestly hadn't had a lot of experience using the simplest of tools, like, let's say, a drill or other handheld power tools. And at my university, you could check these things out for different projects that you'd be doing. And I was kind of nervous to check them out because sometimes I didn't even know the correct name for things, or I was a little bit nervous to use the equipment. And I'd say, for the most part, the professors, you know, teach you the safety of the tools and how to use them. But I do feel there was sometimes an assumption that people just kind of knew how to use a drill. And here I am, new to it and a little bit nervous to practice in front of my peers that seemed to all know what they were doing. So I wish there would have been maybe a little more emphasis on, you know, teaching me as a female engineer, or maybe even just in general, engineers that haven't had exposure to those things, maybe taking some time to teach about those things and have some time to practice in a space that you aren't really afraid of what your peers may think. But that being said, when it came to like larger tools, I took a class in, what was it, like Mastercam, I think it was. So how to create or manufacture things using the CNC machine or the lathe and the mill. And in those cases, I actually felt more comfortable on the big equipment because the professor had described, you know, here's all of the background about the device, the tool. Here's the safety steps that you need to take. And then we had a very safe space to practice and be exposed to it. So as simple as it was, again, I wish that I would have maybe had that same experience with the simpler tools. But overall, it's been good, but I think it can be challenging as a female in engineering. And one thing that I always advocate for is make sure that you're negotiating. You know, I think it's been said that females sometimes don't ask for what they think they deserve. They sometimes may just expect to be recognized for the work that they're doing and then rewarded at the time that is right. But that's one thing I always advocate, like, make sure that you're negotiating, make sure that you're doing your research about your worth and pushing for that fair compensation as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. But when it comes to engineering education and undergraduate or graduate, the biomedical engineering degree is or biomedical engineering overall is very broad. So do you think looking for a degree in another area of engineering that's maybe specialized in something related to biomedical engineering is something to look to?
I think it's really important to have engineers that have like the biomedical engineering schooling, because you're exposed to more classes that relate to anatomy and some of these things that like the core engineering degrees may not have exposure to. I, as a mechanical engineer, the only exposure I had to anatomy or anything med device related was through my senior design project. And a lot of that was information I had to gather on my own and do the research on my own. So I do think, the core engineering areas probably have a little more versatility to which industries they can go into. But as a biomedical engineer, I think, you're really set up well to enter medical device industry. And, there's pros and cons, I think, to either path. I've heard some people say like they like to see like a core engineering undergraduate and then specialize as a master's degree. But I've also seen, positions where it's focused on, wanting a biomedical engineer for that role. And sometimes that's preferred over other engineers. So I think it really just depends on what positions you're applying for, what industry you're looking to get into. If it's specific to medical device, then biomedical engineering degree is probably the best one that you could think to get. So sometimes I wish I would have even taken that route myself, but at the university that I went to, it wasn't an offered degree program. So yeah.
Do you think if you had a biomedical engineering degree that it would change anything in your career path?
Honestly, at this point, I would say no. I've been able to learn a lot of the, clinical side of things and get that background just through experience and collaborating with our medical safety resources. Another thing to note, like a lot of the work that we do is very cross-functional. So, as an engineer, I need to understand how the device works, how failures could impact the patient. And, I generally understand the impact, but I always include or, need to include the medical safety function because they are the experts on, the clinical side of things. And, I think that's an important point to make, like when you enter industry, remember that you're not going to know everything. A lot of people go into industry thinking they can solve every problem on their own, that they don't need to collaborate. But in large companies especially, a lot of the projects, I think most, I can't think of very many that aren't cross-functional. So you need to involve the experts in the necessary spaces to come to the best outcome. And you reach it a lot quicker too when you have those experts rather than trying to learn everything on your own. That can sometimes hold you back in terms of the timing.
So what skills are necessary to work in a biomedical device industry?
There's, of course, all of the technical skills, which I feel your degrees or a person's degree would prepare them for. I always think of engineering degrees as they kind of teach you to problem solve more than anything. So when I entered industry, I'm not necessarily applying a lot of those like core engineering principles on the daily basis, but I am solving problems and I'm recognizing cases in which I need to apply that core knowledge to the work that I'm doing. So technical skills are very important, but also on the non-technical side, I think communication is really key. I've helped interview engineers for positions at Medtronic, and one thing I've noticed is with some of the newer engineers that are coming into industry, they've often recognized or had experiences where again, they thought they could solve the problem on their own and they didn't need to collaborate, but, soon learned either they weren't able to complete the project or get the results that they needed in the allocated time. So making sure your communication skills are well developed is very important. And a lot of that, I would say, you develop, of course, throughout your schooling, but when you enter your first job too, you become more and more proficient with sending emails. They're pretty standard nowadays in industry, especially again working from home. You develop a lot of that just through experience. But a recommendation that I have is, always be willing to ask for feedback from your peers or your mentors. One situation I can remember a couple years ago at Medtronic, one of my female mentors mentioned, you don't have to thank everyone for every email that they send you. You don't need to, if they're providing you information or feedback, that's kind of expected of their job, their position. So you don't have to send a thank you email after everything. You can just save those for sometimes those very important situations, like let's say someone gets you a review in a day, maybe save the thank you for that moment. So little things like that, just to, it's helped me to realize how to make my own communication more efficient, but also something I'm continuing to develop and ask for feedback about.
In school, maybe undergraduate or graduate, did you try any research opportunities?
So undergraduate, I only got an undergraduate degree myself, but yes, my research opportunities were focused again on materials. So my materials professor was focused on, I think it was like thin film superconductors. So we would actually build these thin films using molecular beam epitaxy. We would go to the University of Minnesota and, take the whole day to build a film that was a couple layers thick, atomically speaking. And the goal of that work was to see if we could increase the temperature at which some of these structures or materials are superconducting. So it was pretty cool research, a lot of time spent in rooms that have no windows, waiting for the results of the tests. I would do a lot of like X-ray analysis of the films after we had created them, as well as like what's called atomic force microscopy, which provides you, I think it was a surface image of the film. So, kind of cool to be able to use some of these or the different equipment, learning how to use it, and then learning how to make the assessment after I had the data back. So that was where my research focused at the University of St. Thomas. And, when I went to MIT, I was helping in a lab, again, focused on materials, but they were looking into different oxide powders and I believe how reactive they were to aiding in like splitting water molecules. So it was quite fun. But I will say, doing research, I never really had this like feeling, this great feeling of accomplishment. What I learned is a lot of times when you do research, you're narrowing down what won't work, so we can focus on what could work. And that was a little frustrating because, to see like we've done all of this work and we don't have a tangible, outcome from all of the work we've put into it. It is important to do that research, but I think that's another thing that drew me to industry, because we're making real world impact. We're improving the lives of patients, and that's something that I'm very passionate about, and happy that I can be a part of this industry.
That's awesome. Do you think that not having a graduate degree held you back, or is a bachelor's still a desirable degree?
I think a bachelor's is a desirable degree. In my roles, I haven't felt that it's held me back, not going after, let's say, a master's degree or PhD. I personally want to get into more of a management track within Medtronic, and I've been given a couple opportunities by my managers that I've had throughout the years to position myself in a way that I could, lead projects or, in my case, again, coordinating those updates from post-market assessments into our living risk management file. So I was given, the opportunity to help coordinate that effort and the work, and little by little, I'm learning a little more about how to assign work, recognizing the strengths of different employees that I'm working with, and, have some of their time to support what I'm doing or what I'm organizing, managing. So it's been really cool because it's, again, a lot of learning on the job and reaching out to managers in the group to see if they have input on issues that I'm experiencing, like how can I mitigate this if I'm not getting the information I need from this resource in a timely fashion. So it's been, again, a lot of on-the-job learning. So there's a part of me that thinks, a master's degree could be helpful because you'd have some of that formal education about management and different strategies you could apply. But I don't think it would hold you back. And I also had the opportunity to talk to some PhD employees or employees at Medtronic with PhDs, and their experience, looking for jobs in industry as a PhD, it was at times a little more limited than what you could find with a bachelor's or master's degree, because it's very focused on like research in industry, which is good, but I think it also like cut them out of the running for certain jobs because they were overqualified. So it's something to consider, depending on what you want to get into. If it is research, then PhD is a great way to go. If it's, just working in industry and kind of supporting new devices and devices that may even exist, then I think bachelor's and master's are a great route.
So if you were to hire a junior engineer to join your team at Medtronic, what are some of the skills or qualities that you'd like to hear about?
Good question. Let me think about that. I really like to see or hear if they're directly coming out of their undergraduate degree. I like to hear about the senior design project and how that experience went, because I think that's typically an engineer's, like, unless they've had an internship or some other experience, I think that's the first situation where they're, collaborating with industry, working on a project with different team members that is a long-term project. And I'm not sure if this is the same across all engineering programs, but my senior design project was, 2 semesters long. So again, having that long-term project and showing, that you're able to proactively take action right away that first semester and get things moving is important. One thing in my experience with my project back in my senior year, I think my group didn't get going on the issue as quickly as we probably should have. A lot of this is because it was, it's more independent than some of your other classes where the teacher sets due dates that are a couple weeks in the future. You have these like tangible due dates, and with senior design, sometimes you have a couple due dates, but then you have like the final presentations at the end of each semester that you're working towards at a high level. So when interviewing new engineers, I think it's important to show that you've made efforts to progress your project in the senior design space in that first semester especially. So if you're not in your senior year yet, maybe keep that in mind. Be very proactive. Try to keep things going. It's challenging, it's new, but if you can do that, it'll really reflect well for job interviews. And then having industry experience or internships or materials research, or sorry, not materials, don't have to do materials research like me. If you have any research experience, you know, really leveraging the transferable skills from those experiences and, you know, describing issues that you've faced, actions that you've taken, and then the results of those actions and how that would then apply for this position that you're applying for. Those are key things that I'm looking for when interviewing, as well as just how an individual presents themselves, their communication in the interview. So that's, I think, a high-level summary of what I focus on.
Did you do a senior design project or internship before you started looking for jobs?
Yes, so that was, again, with the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. So it's about an hour and a half away from the cities. And, you know, it was focused on vascular grafts. I don't think I can go into too much detail about the specifics, but it was really fun to learn a little bit about the heart and what is a graft, because before this experience, I had no clue what a bypass surgery was or why a person would need that. And learned a lot, had some great connections at the Mayo Clinic as well. And, you know, we came out of that project pretty successful with the goal that we had set. We kind of met the goal at the last minute, which was a great feeling, and then had a pretty cool presentation for our senior design presentation day to the, I guess, to the sponsors and the public.
Is Medtronic accepting any undergraduate students for internships, or if they're online or maybe international?
Yes, so there are definitely some internship programs through Medtronic. I think there's kind of general internships. I can't remember if they're posted to our careers page, but I could check on that to confirm. One that I'm familiar with is the WISE internship, which is Women in Science and Engineering internship. So focused on getting more females involved, getting them internships at Medtronic. I've had the opportunity to talk with a couple interns this summer as a mentor and just get their take on the program. And sounds like, you know, even being remote this year, it's been an amazing experience for both of the individuals that I've been talking with. It's cool to see the projects that they're pulled into and how quick they come up to speed on the work being done. And at the end, they need to present their work to those within their group that they've been working with, and oftentimes upper level management. So it's a great experience to get visibility in the organization and get your foot in the door. I believe Medtronic also tries to hire a certain percentage of the interns, you know, to invest in, you know, if we're investing in talent through an internship, we want to hire that talent in the end, which is also a cool initiative to see that Medtronic takes. So internships are important to get your foot in the door, and I'd also say contracting, being a contractor at Medtronic is important. A lot of the people I know that have been hired full-time either come from an internship or a contracting position.
Do you have any advice for students interested in industry?
I would recommend when you're looking for companies that you'd like to work for, really make sure you're focusing on their mission, that it's something that aligns with your core beliefs. It's very fulfilling to work for a company where their mission aligns with your own mission or core values. I feel that's true for me at Medtronic. Also, don't be afraid to send an email to someone that works there or connect with people on LinkedIn. If it's a place that you'd like to work, try to get some of those connections made in your senior year or before, to again maybe set up an informal interview, just talk to that resource and get their take on company culture. If they have any recommendations about how you could get a foot in the door at whatever company it may be, don't be afraid to reach out. It might be very intimidating, but a lot of people really appreciate that initiative that students take, because it is somewhat rare. Like, I've been involved again in a lot of outreach activities with students that are either in high school or college. And I always like to offer, if you want to set up an interview in the future with me to, just talk through, like, what do I do on a daily basis? I can maybe get to know you a little bit better. I always offer that as an option. And I'm surprised, or I'm always, I guess, impressed by the students that actually take me up on the offer, because it's typically a handful, maybe 2 or 3 engineers. So don't be afraid to do it, because when people offer that, they mean it.
So with the biomedical engineering industry, it's growing with lots of inventions and innovations. What excites you most about the future of biomedical engineering?
Let's see. I think what's really exciting is to see, in some ways, like how this situation of the pandemic is impacting our industry, and how a lot of the visits are, trying to move virtual. I do wonder if that's going to maybe have long-term impact to the industry to maybe make things a little more efficient, maybe faster moving in some cases. I'm not directly involved in like developing the new products, but from a maintenance perspective, I'm always looking for like opportunities or improvements on how we can do the work, and also structure procedures and streamline the work, because it'll, in my opinion, it'll help to improve the time it takes to get things to market or to complete some of these deliverables too. So it's been at times, admittedly, a little frustrating how slow moving the medical device industry can be. But I'd say it's not as slow as some of the research that I was involved in. So having that as a baseline, med device seems very, very quick compared to that.
Do you know any organizations, like, along with the Biomedical Engineering Society, that you are maybe part of that's engineering based?
At this point, I'm honestly not very involved. I'm involved through the STEM outreach activities that I do, but I would like to get back to being involved with the Society of Women in Engineering. I was involved with SWE in my undergraduate career, and I should probably make a little more time to pursue that at Medtronic. We do have, I think Medtronic has like sponsored people to go to the SWE conference, like some people that are in groups in risk management that I know they've attended. I think was one of the last ones in California, but really cool experience and cool to hear how they were involved in that. So it is something that I want to challenge myself to get more involved again. It's been fun to be involved with BMES a little bit more in the past couple of years. I've been involved through the Coulter College, which is in a nutshell, it's a senior design project in a weekend from like Thursday to Sunday, where students research an issue, problem space, and then come up with a solution and have to pitch it to mentors from business. And it's a really cool experience. That was one program I was involved in, and then this year involved in a design competition through BMES, sponsored by Medtronic. So a lot of my interests are in that space of kind of design competition, I would say, or how to commercialize product to market. It's an area that I'm still learning about, but it's pretty fun. It's cool to be able to position yourself also if you're in industry and kind of in this little niche group, like let's say risk management for me and maintaining risk file. I can still have some involvement on the commercialization side or learning more about that through these activities too.
So you talked about some outreach that you do. Are you part of like an outreach program through Medtronic?
Yeah, so I help to lead what's called the Medtronic Exploring Post. It's a program that we hold once every 2 weeks, typically, at Medtronic, aimed at high school age students to give them some exposure to different STEM careers that they could pursue. And so each session, we have typically 3 presenters from different areas of Medtronic. So that could be heart valves or sensors or software engineering. And these presenters provide some background about projects they've been involved in, products that they've helped bring to market. So last year, I took a more active role to help with, registration for that program, as well as developing our icebreaker night, kind of a fun way to get the students talking and challenge myself a little bit in a role that I've never really developed a design competition that we could complete in an hour and a half. So that, is through Medtronic, and a really fun program to be a part of. Hope to continue for years in the future.
Hey, that's really cool. So we have 5 minutes left right now, so we're going to do one more question. If anyone submitted a question that was not answered, we'll send out a follow-up email with Alyssa's answers. And keep an eye out for the Biomedical Engineering Society's next interview with industry announcement, which is scheduled to be live in September. So our last question is, what prompted you to start rock climbing, and how do you like it? And will you climb Yosemite one day?
Ooh. Honestly, I've only climbed in an indoor gym so far. I do want to get outdoors eventually, but what prompted me to do rock climbing was a club that was offered through my university, rock climbing club. So I went rock climbing and met a great group of people, which I'm still friends with to this day. And what I enjoy most about rock climbing is it's a great way to stay in shape for one, but also it's kind of a puzzle that you have to solve when going up the wall. So you have to consider, how can I use my body most efficiently to conserve energy while, climbing the wall and completing the route. So one thing I always say to new climbers is make sure that you use your skeleton. So if you're hanging on a rock climbing hold, it's better to have your arm fully extended as much as you can rather than clinging to the wall. Because if you think about it, when you cling to the wall, you're exerting energy from your arm muscles. But when you're hanging from the wall and fully extending your arm, you save a lot of energy in your arms, but then your hands, you need to really build up the strength there. So a little trick on how to scale the wall a little better. I think a lot of my friends rock climbing are actually engineers too. So if you've never tried it, it's kind of a fun activity to get involved in if you have an interest.
Right, so that's our last question. So thank you everyone for attending. We're really excited that you're here. And thank you so much to Alyssa Johnson for being here with us today. So that is everything. So I guess we'll see you guys next time.